Hello and welcome to Royale Without Cheese, our bi-weekly podcast in which we discuss both the classic and the unknown of Hollywood and foreign cinema from the then and now. We are your hosts, me, Miguel Aido, Tomás Ferreira,
Hello, hello.
hello Tomás, and Leonardo Miranda.
Hey there.
Three filmmakers in an informal dialogue with a film review each episode. As part of our barbecue and scones, reviews in both English and Portuguese will be available for different listeners. Today's episode will be in English and we'll be having a go at Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind. Portuguese speakers can head to the Portuguese labeled content section. Now sit back and enjoy the windy. The first film, I was thinking about the podcast films. Yeah, we did. It reminded me of the sort of Dazed and Confused, sort of out there-ish, everywhere-ish kind of style. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, the editing is very intense. The way cuts to people. Sometimes it feels like they're finishing each other's lines. It feels like it's just one single dialogue, but it's being finished by different people at different times.
Yeah.
The way it jumps from color to black and white to a 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter to the wide screen of the film within a film. There's so much going on.
Yeah, the editing really brings about a lot of uneasiness because it feels like the same dialogue has different iterations. So it's like you're never quite in the same dialogue. It's strange the way it cuts. It's like you're jumping to different perspective, even though the same characters are in the scene, the same sort of angles. Yet it always feels a bit different. There's this constant feeling of an editing which is very fragile. It's almost like it's fragile.
Yeah.
It's strange.
It's crumbling, the film.
Yeah.
Just like the industry that it's portraying. The
Ooh.
dying Hollywood.
A shout out to an industry we don't know.
But I mean, dying Hollywood in the context of the film. That it's portraying like a generation that is, just disappearing and being replaced by the youth. Bogdanovich in relationship to Jay Caniford, John Huston, which Huston himself sort of as a stand-in for Wells, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about with this film.
I think, the film has this autobiographical vein to it. And also, it's so self-referential, not just in the autobiographical vein of it, but also in the context of it. Because it is very much about the Hollywood New Wave and a director of old trying to, remain hip with the crowd. And it's probably a director of old that, much like, for example, I don't know, for example, Nicholas Ray, who transitions himself into a different period, or Dennis Hopper, that feels more akin to the youngsters than to his peers. And I think it's very much, the film gains power and value a lot because it is Orson Welles himself, the man and the character, knowing that his experience in Hollywood, his traumas, his difficulties. I think the film gains value because the awareness of that. And it's very much, his story of trying to experiment with the form, trying to push further, trying to continue from the place that F for Fake started him on. But yet the constraints of an industry that wants to remain risk averse and audience tests based in regarding to how they produce films keeps them from that. And you have not only that, but also it's a film very much about third party views of a man, and the man divided between his human self and his artist self, and how does where does he realize has a real person with intentions that can be truthful and readable by the people that watch his films, that watch his art. And I think everyone has an opinion, but he never really breathes I think there's a very interesting moment where he's coming to the ranch. He parks the car, he arrives, and at that moment we have barely seen Jake Hannaford. He's always present in the mouth of others. His crew, the critics, the journalists who are just lying around to catch him. We just have a glimpse of his back leaving the studio at the beginning of the film, and the frenetic editing with these fast cuts between zooms and dialogue lines coming up upon each other. It really builds up this persona that he has, that really invades everything and everyone, has a pop culture phenomenon, a figure. So when he arrives at the house, he's kind of admired by the whole camera surrounding him, the journalists coming in and the film students coming in with the Super 8 cameras, and this avalanche of cameras towards him and everybody, the film crew, the real people. It just feels so self-referential, because both what is in front of the camera, both what constitutes the mise-en-scène and what is behind the mise-en-scène, is a comment, is a reflection of where filmmaking is at this moment of the context, is a reflection of the fact that the constraints around the camera and the sound equipment have gotten loose and allowed us to film differently. And that is both behind the camera and in front of the camera. And in that moment, when he sees this avalanche of cameras around him, I think Hannaford is both kind of insulted and disgusted by it, the fact that his privacy is being invaded, but at the same time, he just gives a smile. He smiles at it, really kind of indifferent. And he's playing this role of being the man and the legend. I think it's somehow, I feel the same towards Orson Welles. Who is the real Orson Welles? You see him in interviews, and you feel like he's such a man of the theater as well, an actor who has directed Shakespeare plays, who constantly hides behind masks. He often would do roles where he would have a fake nose and he would need that sort of mask. And he says about The Other Side of the Wind that I essentially made a film that I wouldn't direct. Yes, I'm experimenting with form, but the other side of the film, The Other Side of the Wind, the film within the film directed by Jake Hannaford, isn't the film that I would do. So that is kind of a mask. But him allowing himself to do that, kind of a fictional offshoot, experimenting with form, is interesting in itself. And so Hannaford, just to sum up, is divided between the man and the myth. He's divided between how much can I go as an artist when I have these kind of creeps and vultures around me, questioning and criticizing everything I do. And I think Jake Hannaford, in that respect, is very much Wells, and how disgruntled he is with the industry. And it's very sad. It's very sad because how can he, continue to love and try to come back to a place, Hollywood, that seemingly loves him so much and admires him so, at least in the media and the public eye, but then rejects him and doesn't give him money to do his shit. It's that's the main contradiction in the film that I find interesting.
Yeah, I see that completely. I think John Huston, the Jake Hannaford, there's a sense that he's always performing for the cameras as well. Like he's cracking jokes and everybody laughs, and he's like, always feels like he has prepared dialogue. Because he has these one-liners all the time that he's saying. He's so charismatic. So yeah, in that sense, very much like Wells. Wells is also, you watch him, he's very captivating, but it also feels like watching a character, watching a performer. And he's performing in interviews, he's performing all the time. But he's very captivating, regardless.
But I think, isn't that supposed to be like an actual film crew during that day? I mean, I think that's supposed to be within the context of
the context the film gives is that, like, within the film, that's like they just told a bunch of students to bring cameras and, like, right? Isn't that what they say? That anyone with a camera, 8, 16 millimeter, whatever, they filmed it. This is like a found footage film in a way.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a great moment in the life of a director. He's like a great director of old classic Hollywood. He makes 70 years old, And so it's almost like Orson Welles himself had invited all the people that love him, that have him in consideration, both journalists and film students alike, to just be at his house and record everything. But it's actually Zara, I think, one of the actresses that he worked with, who demanded that everything must be recorded or something. But it is interesting, the idea of a film within a film. And the film, I think it's the only film that the film The Other Side of the Other Side of the Wind, the real film, the film that we three have seen, is a film about itself. I think it's the only film that it's about itself. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird to almost put it into words, because to talk about itself, it fictionalizes itself, you know? It's what's going on, because the relationship between Jack Hannaford and his own film, The Other Side of the Wind, which is not the same as The Other Side of the Wind that we are seeing, is a relationship of Orson Welles with his own object of art, Other Side of the Wind. So it's very
I think that's a
MC
bit of,
Hesher in that relationship.
It's almost perfect that it was released 40 years later.
yeah, but
It's
that's kind of what I was saying. I think your perspective is a bit biased of the fact that you know the film came out today, whereas it was filmed in the 70s. So to what extent was the film already
Oh, but
reflecting on itself?
if it was done in the 70s, if it was released in the 70s, I would have the same thoughts.
But I mean,
It does not depend on the release being delayed.
but the point of yes, of course. But what I mean is, in being delayed, it suffered from having a different editor, taking notes from going to the notes of Orson Welles. So it's not really the same thing that it
yeah,
was
like it puts
at the
into
time.
question the authorship, like how faithful
Exactly. Yeah.
is
For
this?
sure.
But at the same time, I do think that brings an interesting element. It almost feels like a film without like an author. It feels like just a
Yeah.
found film, like a crazy mishmash of ideas, of intentions.
And it gains this side that Mash said about the fact that the film
Is about
starts
it.
to reflect about
Yeah,
itself,
exactly.
which I don't think it was entirely possible, perhaps in the original, but came with it
I disagree.
I mean, but it's almost
Yeah.
non-disagreeable because you don't know what the film was in the 70s.
The thing is, it is a film very based on improvisation, with a lot of cameras going on. And Wells himself, when he started editing, because he did start editing at the time in this after 76, he himself chopped it into little bits, into little pieces, and that's kind of the only way you can approach it, and then kind of meshing it together. So, and then even if the editing would be different, the content that you have is this director of old shooting this film that he cannot finish, that he doesn't have funds to finish, which is The Other Side of the Wind, and it's very much reflective of the troubles that Orson Welles had to do it. So if this film came out then, I would feel the same way. It's not about, yes, there is another authorship. Yes, there's always the question that you talked about. What is the real film? Perhaps it would be slightly different, but in the end, the content wouldn't be. The content is there. The characters are there. The form of it is there from the shooting, because it's inherent to the way it was filmed. You are going to have this frenetic kind of thing. I don't believe you can have a very polished scene with this film in a hypothetical situation. If there were an original film made, you cannot have a wide shot, reverse shot, and not accept. It's just very inherently
yeah,
feels all over the place.
I do agree. I just think that since the editing had such an impact on the film that we've seen, it makes me wonder, if the post-production could have changed the film so much, exactly how much of it was through the post-production, and it got to the point where it got through editing. So it's just because of that I wonder if it was any different. But I mean, I agree. It's considering that he directed the whole thing in the 70s and he started editing at the time, probably wouldn't be so different that much. But the doubt remains, I think.
I think the aesthetic of the film is probably what Wells intended. It's just you never because he wasn't fully there for the editing, so there are choices that they had to make, and they can't make it for Wells. That's just
of course, for sure. But in the matter of the meaning of it, at least in the terms of him being a director of old and trying to doing his comeback and trying to finish a film that is important to him, but the constraints of the industry and third-party perceptions not allowing him. So that's pretty much there. And I think the crew understood that, and he left memos, he left notes. So even if the form can be slightly different, I think there are things that are inherent to what he shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wells didn't start having problems with financing films with this one.
No.
It's one of the constants in his life after Citizen Kane, or maybe after he leaves Hollywood. I think that's one of the constants. So it's not, the context here maybe doesn't change that much. If it's released in the 70s, that is still true, that he has trouble getting money, even though he's considered a legend and everybody loves him, loves talking to him, loves having him around, but no one gives him money to make his films.
Yeah, that's very sad. And in that respect, to that extent, I think it's a film for filmmakers. It's a film that is very much built for the perception of a filmmaker as a viewer to watch. Particularly independent filmmakers will relate with the irony, the fun irony of certain scenes. For example, I think that is deliciously beautiful. The fact that you have this fast, it's an example of a film. I normally say that I like, a film that really takes its time with the characters, let the acting shine through, and so have lingering shots and be minimalist. But there are times when I like fast-paced editing, and it can very much be the style of a film. Godard does that, and for example, in this film is a perfect example of how fast-paced editing can be used to really, just in terms of form, bring you into the cacophony that is the party. You feel it is a film that, first point, really romanticizes reality as film. I feel myself to be inside the film because of the cacophony and the fast-paced editing and the cuts between zooms and bringing lines upon each other. I feel I am in the party. I feel very immersed by the film, and it's not a question of the traditional immersion of answering to classical narrative questions of one protagonist, one antagonistic force, one clear motive. It is about the editing making me feel so. So I find that very, very much interesting in terms of form, that it is the form that is making me, and also the acting, of course, but emotionally compelled by the film and feel immersed in the film. I feel like I am inside a house in that chaos. But one thing that is delicious about the beginning is the counterbalance between that editing, style of editing, the crew getting, on the bus with the dummies, which on that regard, I find interesting, commenting on how a director's ego has a bad side and a good side. Because yes, he elevates people, he elevates the actors that he finds as undiscovered talents, but at the same time, he uses people, he treats them like dummies. It's literally putting the crew on the bus with the dummies of the actor he's going to shoot later at night. And at one point, the critic says, well, he brings them into existence. He's like God. He conceives them. And then the other critic says, talking about his actors who are undiscovered talents, and he puts on screen. Another critic replies, well, and he cuts them out of existence as well. So, it comments to that side of the director as well, the good and the bad of the ego. But what I liked about the beginning is that counterbalance between the frenetic editing, and then suddenly there is this very quiet scene, this very kind of secretive scene, because it's filmed behind these kind of shadowy bits. I don't know how to describe it. And in the background, you see this producer of the film, Max David, meeting with Billy, one of the the stooges of the crew, who's trying to show him the dailies and convince him that the film is going on well and we need more money. And it's just interesting to see Max saying, yeah, it's good, but I want to read the script. And Billy I love Billy because he's so, there is no script, he's just makes it up as he goes along. He has done it before. Just such a wide-eyed kid. And it's just so interesting to see this thing happening in that moment. It's like Wells is saying, could we find this ideal thing that we want to find as filmmakers? And I think that's what I was saying, that this is a film made for filmmakers. We will laugh at the irony of this question. Where is the script? There isn't a script. He doesn't have one. But the thing is, we want to try he's trying to convince him to give him the money. He's trying to find this ideal combination between this risk-averse way of producing films that are big budget films, audience tested, and combined with these artful films that are run by fully the intuition and the range-free, the emotional, side of a director who is kind of wild, free, and has no range. And trying to combine that too, what is the ideal? It's almost like trying to find that ideal, which still doesn't exist, I think, perfectly. It's almost like trying to find the perfect method of electing people for government. It hasn't yet been found. Really, it's the perfect way to elect bodies of government. So the ideal way to make to make cinema that is both risk averse, big budget film, but also artful. I think it hasn't been found yet, or there are always inconsistencies. There are always things that don't go right, and that's I think what the film also reflects upon.
Absolutely. But I think, like, I watched that film that he's making. I'm like, would I give money to this if I was a producer?
True.
'Cause it's like, and I think that's interesting on Wells' part, that he doesn't make the film within a film like a very good thing. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of cheap. Not cheap. It's
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of,
I don't even care about the film.
yeah, exactly. But you still feel like, but give the man money, let him try.
Yeah, I want to let him try it because, you know,
I mean, it's even strange to call that
A
almost
film.
a film, yeah, because it's
It's an
such.
attempt.
It's almost like a really long ad, like for a perfume or a car, because they keep chasing each other, and then there's this sense of publicity. It's strange. It's almost like through that he's asking the money.
Yeah, and then the way the guy Billy is explaining the film to the producer as we were watching the images, it's like he's giving context that it's like impossible for us to see sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, he's following her because she loves that doll. She always loved that. We don't know that, man.
yeah. And he's always like chewing, stuff like the gummy bears or whatever he has. And Jay Canafort makes a joke about it. Maybe it's that gummies that you chew on. You don't have any more words. What? What is wrong with my gummies? He starts complaining.
But the performances here, you're talking about the editing.
Yeah, the performances are outstanding.
Outstanding. Peter Bogdanovich is a good actor.
Yeah, Bogdanovich is awesome. And when he starts doing impressions, it's more of a
Oh,
funny
yeah.
little
Yeah.
moment, but I like
I
it.
even feel like I know
James Stewart
The
impression.
James Stewart, he did it.
Yeah, like sometimes I hear something that he does, and I'm like, I know that person. Who is that? But then I was just trying to think who he's impersonating.
But I mean, I think for me, John Huston his performance is even better. I mean,
He drips with charisma.
Yeah,
I
his
think.
smile.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
you just want to be in the room with him. You
Yeah.
just want, It's like it's instant man crush.
Yeah.
he's sort of Clint Eastwood type of director actor that has this charisma, just dripping.
This rough machismo.
Yeah.
But he brings also a tragic sadness, like that dimension to it. You do feel like he's very lonely and sad. Like when he's talking to Bogdanovich, Otter Lake, and I think Otter Lake asks him like, how many times have you been broke now or whatever. The way they're speaking about their finances, it's pretty sad because you know that one is very successful now.
Yeah.
And the other is struggling a lot, and he says like, "Oh, I've been broke one time." It's like you feel like that's a lie as well. It's probably been broke a lot more times.
Yeah.
But there's
There's
a
also
distance between them that comes from the fact that their financial realities are so different now, and their support from studios are so different. I don't know. It's strange because you don't see how they were before, but you feel like there's a massive difference between them now.
And that's the same reality with Peter Bogdanovich and Orson Welles as well, because it's a relationship mentor-mentee, and Peter was, at the high in his career, and Orson wasn't, and he was feeling that it wasn't fair and Welles wasn't being treated right by the film industry and community. So it's one other way that it mirrors reality.
Yeah.
And the film never loses track of itself and what it wants to say, despite having this very loose editing. It always has these quieter moments, which are full of an intimacy that amongst this environment of a whole party going on, you go to different parts of the party and different people doing different things. You have Zara doing an interview. Suddenly you have Dennis Hopper talking to camera. Then you have Jack Hannaford on another room with Peter Bogdanovich complaining about financing and whatnot. And then there's the whole question that I think gives it a lot of, gives the, you know, the atmosphere within the ranch such another layer of richness, which is the fact that Jake Hannaford gets along with the other members of the crew, closer ones, kind of old guard ones, and starts talking about the possibility of asking for money, asking Otterlake for money, because he comes from a rich family and all, and he says we don't screw our friends, we don't ask our friends for money. You know, that's interesting, that relationship that starts to build, and it has a lot to do with the fact that they are at different financial positions. It talks a lot to the idea, and in the end, Hannaford feels betrayed by Bogdanovich. It speaks a lot to the fact that Orson Welles feels betrayed by Bogdanovich, and then Bogdanovich betrayed by Welles, because he went on to speak on a talk show with Burt Reynolds, and he foul-mouthed Bogdanovich. And then Bogdanovich phoned Welles and he said, I tuned into you last night and to see what you thought of me, and now I know. Yeah, so I don't know. It's that thing. It's that thing. When a director has ego, has a good side and a bad side,
exactly.
and particularly when you become too much of a legend, I think, and talked by third-party people, fans and admirers and critics, and I think that's very much part of the film at its core. And well, as an example of that, you know, you feel the liberty to say shit that you shouldn't have said, and you hurt people in the process, and you use people in the process. And I think in that sense, Other Side of the Wind is very much about the behavior of, you know, a director at its most extremes, both personally as a person and the ethics of being a person, and also the ethics of filmmaking. Like you are saying, the film, Other Side of the Wind, within the film, doesn't seem to go anywhere. It's just him kind of giving a go, experimenting, and the whole question should be, should we give money to him? But as well, what if he does something good? What if he does something great out of this? You know, people felt
But he
the same
also has
about the
an
real Other
interesting
Side of the
line.
Wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easton also has an interesting line, which is like, I mean, I don't borrow money. You don't borrow money from yourself. So you know, he also hints at these possibilities of asking for help.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the ego.
I think the line is more you don't it's worst thing to, well, it's good to borrow from each other. You shouldn't borrow ideas from yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't think it's ideas. I think that's another scene, I think.
Oh, it must be different scenes then.
Yeah, but I remember that one. Yeah, I remember where it's okay to borrow from each other, but you should never. But if you borrow from yourself, then there's a problem or something like that.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's maybe it's that one.
But there's other things in the film that I don't really get, like the midgets thing. I don't get.
Yeah, it's strange.
The midgets, I think it's so out of left field. Like it doesn't belong.
Yeah,
but fine, whatever.
it's just, it feels like they're just trying to make the party crazier.
Yeah.
But this doesn't really translate.
It's next
Next
stage to parties. It's bring the midget.
The film ends like with a giant, like an inflatable cock. It's like a dick.
Yeah.
Tumbles.
Like,
it's very weird, strange.
Very weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying visually, Wells is it's one of my favorite directors. His technique and approach, he's constantly asking how can we film this in a brand new way, and so I don't have a favorite film exactly. To think of a favorite film of Wells, to me, his films are an amalgamation to me. They don't differ from one another. It's like when I think of my favorite Wells film, to my mind that just comes Wells himself, the name, you know, everything. I think of Othello. I love Othello, the opening. But then I think of Touch of Evil and moments I like in it. But then Citizen Kane, certain things. And Citizen Kane is not even my favorite of his all. But it's just an amalgamation of everything.
Yeah, I think Touch of Evil is probably the one I like the most. I love the most. But I love all of his films. I don't think there's been a Wells film. Maybe Macbeth. I didn't care that much for that one.
I haven't seen Macbeth. Oh, I really like Falstaff.
Chimes.
The form.
I have to rewatch it.
Chimes at Midnight. Just has a whole atmosphere. So interesting. The way he films a forest, the way he films a castle.
And F for fake, obviously.
F for
Fantastic.
fake, of course. It's a very fun, provocative ride, F for fake.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree that what you're saying, it does feel like more like a whole. It's like,
Yeah. It's like, images come to my mind, just random images of every film, like color, black and white, everything. I don't think of one film. Othello just gives me filmmaker orgasm because there are certain scenes in it that I really legit. It's like when I saw, well, this is a Marvel film, but I was, I don't know, 10 or something. When I saw Iron Man for the first time, I went to the cinema, and I had an attack watching the Iron Man. Like, it was an action scene, and I was so giddy that I couldn't control myself. Like, there's just explosions going on. It was one of the first like superhero films, and I was like looking at it. I was like, oh my fucking god! I was like just going up in the chair, and the adult with me was like, sit down, sit down. I was like crazy. Shooting, oh my god, he did that, shooting. It's crazy. That was like super hyperactive. I get
And Marvel
hyperactive
films
with
never did that again. We can't ignore the fact that the script for this film, The Other Side of the Wind, is incredible. I mean,
I don't even know.
you know,
Was it written, or was he also like kind of winging it? I don't know. But it doesn't feel like it. It feels
yeah,
written.
and especially because of the way the editing goes with different perspectives on the conversations. I feel like it's too complex for just a simple improvisation.
Yeah, no, at least a sketch was made. I'd say for each scene.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, perhaps no. There
But,
was a
yeah.
script as in a a very
uh,
simple draft.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine.
I don't think it was that simple, honestly.
I don't know.
No?
I think structurally there was a sketch, but I don't.
Because
I
he
can't
did
imagine.
say it was improvised.
Yeah, I can't imagine writing down these dialogues.
No.
But I also can't imagine every scene being coming out of nowhere.
Well, I mean, I imagine more a type of, like a Larry David type of structuring where you don't
Right,
write the
okay.
dialogue. You write like the setup of the scene, and then you work it through. There's dialogues that are written because you have to get to the point, but other things are more improvised.
But even in a show like Curb, it's you can tell that those moments exist, especially if you know how it's written through the acting or some breaks. And in here, it feels so fluid. I
yeah,
mean,
that's true.
it warrants some doubt, I think.
It must
because
be a meeting between the two approaches that I think can agree on. We just don't know how much was written. Basically.
yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Cassavetes and Larry David type
I
of
was
deal.
constantly thinking of Cassavetes.
Yeah, me too.
Very much.
And the thing is, for example, in Fuller, I don't buy the over-the-top acting because I'm meant to be immersed and believe the story, and there's a suspension of disbelief going on. While in Cassavetes, the over-the-top acting, and here, not the acting, but the frenetic side with the camera and very often handheld use, it gives me another kind of immersion. Where I'm completely bought by the approach. And I love Cassavetes. I love the over-the-top acting of Cassavetes. Well, where despite the over-the-top acting, the actors seem to have such a gripping control over what they are doing, and I buy into the emotions. Yeah, while in some other films, perhaps I would feel silly.
Possibly. I think it's the commitment to it, probably. Because the actors really commit to it. So in Cassavetes, I remember in Faces that happening a lot. Like just laughing hysterically right in front of the camera and screaming.
I mean, the film is the acting. The film is the acting. Much like in The Other Side of the Wind, the film is the acting. It's just the actors shining through with their lines. And
it's many things, I think. Honestly, it's one of those cases where it's really hard to tell which part of it is stronger, because the editing is so causes such an impression. The constant use of black and white against color, makes such an impression as well. The directing, the acting, I mean, it's strong on so many levels.
Yeah, it's everything seems to work
Yeah, it's almost like it couldn't have been in any other way. All these things, it's you know just how the story was imagined. There was a clear idea behind it, very specific thing in mind that you wanted to capture.
And then again, there were a lot other films that he was making or intent to make that he didn't never saw the light of day. Not just the other side of the wind.
But yeah, it's
But yeah,
very frustrating.
it's very sad.
It's sad.
It's very sad.
Frustrating and sad because you know how good he is. It's like it's not like it's an unknown guy and you don't know if he's gonna make a good film or
Yeah.
not. Like it's Orson Welles. Like
And his film, The Other Side of the Wind, was apprehended by the Iranian government because the production company was Iranian, the son-in-law of the Shah.
he was working with anyone.
Yeah, just to get the money. The son-in-law of the Shah had his production company, and then when Ayatollah Khamenei like overthrew the Shah, the company just shut off, and so the film went into a vault in Paris, and he was trying to make them. He was
They
trying
put a
to get the film
fatwa
back
on
to him.
Orson.
Yeah, and he was just trying to get the film back, and he went to Paris until his like last dying breath. He was trying to get the film back to his hands, but France wouldn't have any. It wouldn't have any of it. They were just saying the film belongs to the producer, and the producer is shut off, so you don't get it. And then the cameraman, the director of photography, I don't remember his name, of The Other Side of the Wind. You know, he really believed Orson. He wanted to, you know, he went the first time he knew that Orson was in the Beverly Hills hotel somewhere, and he went there to meet him. That's how their whole relationship started. He told about this film, The Other Side of the Wind, that he was making, and they started making it. And while they were doing this film, which lasted from 70 to 76, he was just picking up other jobs and saying, Orson, I have to eat, I have to pay for stuff. And he did porn films, he did B movies, he did films for Ed Wood. You know, he didn't want that in his resume, but he did them so he could, you know, pay for stuff and do his Orson's film. And then he never got up. And then, you know, the cameraman died in the 90s or something. And, you know, he spent all his life, you know, thinking that The Other Side of the Wind would be his grand film, his breakthrough. And yet, all he did were these porn films and B movies, you know, it's just, imagine your life wasted. I mean, you know, it's just.
What's the
very
name of
frustrating.
the DP?
I don't remember. It's Craig. I think it's Craig something.
it?
I don't know.
I mean, it says here's Gary Graver,
Gary, yeah.
but he died in 2006.
Ah, okay, fine. Well,
Yeah.
2006, 90s.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's especially because it took so long to actually finish it.
Yeah, and it's so good. Like, even that, like,
Yeah.
I can really, I see why Wells and the crew would be invested in it, because it really is fantastic, even in this form.
You know another film that feels like it's an Orson Welles films, but it's not an Orson Welles films? It's The Third Man. Miguel doesn't like him very much. But I agree with Miguel in the sense that the music in that film is very, I don't know, I mean, it's very overbearing and it doesn't make any sense for the
Right.
tone of the film. I have problems with the music. But I like the film, I like Wells in it. He's very, you know, seductive. Like he is.
I mean, he's definitely a good actor, but I mean, that's not the whole thing.
That's not the whole thing. I don't know, but I remember enjoying the plot.
Yeah,
But I'll have to rewatch.
I don't think I'll rewatch it.
Yeah.
Carol Reed. I thought Carol Reed was a woman.
Yeah,
I was like,
that-
that's good. Like, good for her. No, it's some guy.
Can't wait for that next
For the
Wells
next
film.
yeah, where he has a lot of potential.
I still believe that he released the film in 2018. To me, it's like I don't see it as a 70s film. I see it as a 2018 film. I want to believe that Wells was here and he released it now.
40 years hiatus.
I think it
Comes back.
it is a intemporal film. It lives in its own time. It's timely and timeless. It's of its time and of no time at all.
Like Orson Welles says, a director is the man who presides over divine accidents. And I think this is a series of divine accidents. That's what the reporters told of the film at the time. And I always remember that line when kind of doing things. It's the unpredictable part of filmmaking that kind of builds its magical moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And we can only hope that they find more lost films from,
lost films from Wells.
or
Yeah.
like footage that they can build into something, or maybe that they find I always talk about this one, but the Magnificent Ambersons, the original cut that was torn apart by the studio.
He was asked by the government during the edit of that film to go to Brazil, I think, and shoot some tribal thing, some cultural stuff. And in the meantime, he receives a phone call from the editor saying, "You need to come back. You need to come back. They're messing up with the film." And it's just why would you backstab someone in the back like that? And then sometimes they make it feel like the media makes it at the time makes it seem like, oh, the director fell from grace, who didn't make much of good stuff after Citizen Kane. It just gets me so fucking annoyed, it just gets me so annoyed.
I was
What are you
watching
talking about?
I was watching Superbad the other day. It was on, and they make like a joke about Orson Welles, which is strange. But they say like that it's like they make a joke about someone peaking in high school, and then after that it's all, like downhill. And they do the bridge with that with Citizen Kane, and then after that it was all downhill. It's like, come on, man. I see the point, but don't throw my man under the bus. He made a lot of masterpieces after that.
Yeah, it's downhill only on a superficial point.
Yeah, exactly.
That he's not working on with Hollywood. But for a lot of people, that's the thing. If you're not Hollywood, then you're surprisingly so. If you're not Hollywood, you are not in the cool group.
Yeah,
You're not doing
ultimately
the right thing.
the problem was that Citizen Kane didn't make money. Like it didn't
Mm-hmm.
make that much money. It made money, but
It's more of an Oscar buzz thing.
yeah, it was very critically acclaimed, but not I don't know if it was a box office bomb technically, but it didn't see the return that they wanted. And so they started, just with every film they tried to change what he was doing, because they saw like Wells was the problem. Like the way he was building the films was why we weren't getting the money back, which is annoying because
On Magnificent Emersons in specific, they were just complaining that it's too sad, it's too depressive, and I'm like, it's the type of thing that gets you annoyed.
I mean, you
Feel
do
like
get
it's
the sentiment around Hollywood because, I mean, it was an elite. Being there was meant something, and
Yeah.
leaving didn't.
yeah, no, I get that. I think Wells was clearly, he liked that status of being a Hollywood guy and being respected
Mhm.
there, but at the same time he had a lot of resentment for it, especially because of the way he was treated. So he liked being in Europe as well, with the higher status guys in Europe, the more artful
Mhm.
guys.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the art. I mean, if he didn't have such a creative, how you say,
Impetus.
drive,
Yeah.
creative drive, it probably wouldn't. I don't know. I guess he would have
And
just stayed
that
there.
is what is most inspiring about him, is that it's his resilience to make films and his love for film and to keep on pushing and doing. And I think that's what's super inspiring about The Other Side of the Wind, even if the director dies at the end. But and himself, I think that's what he's a model, a role model in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Wells he's the man.
He always showed up for Q&As. He always showed up for interviews, even in the Dick Cavett show back in the USA. Despite the fact that he wasn't being accepted. He showed up at the AFI when they gave him the Life Achievement Award, literally begging for money to complete Other Side.
Yeah.
Nobody gave a crap, and that's so sad.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's sad. Also, on a final note, now I remember you're talking about Othello. Filming Othello, the film, like the documentary he does. That one, like, watching that, I feel like I learned so much about process and making a film and like the difficulties. And that's the thing I like about Wells a lot in listening to him, that he feels like you feel on the same level as him in the sense that the way he talks to people, I don't feel like he diminishes you or that he's like oh, I'm so superior. I made Citizen
Yeah.
Kane. Like, no, he talks to you and you learn from it. And I think I value that a lot from filmmakers that do interviews and stuff like that. I like to learn from them. And like, that's something that I guess you can criticize sometimes about Godard, that he's very cryptic. You don't know what the fuck he's talking about. But in other
Yes, he's
times,
not an educator.
other times I think he's an educator. Like in the Dick Cavett interview that he did, I think he does say something that he's a different kind of educator.
Yeah.
Let's say he's a
But there are a lot of them who
Professor.
seem to just lay down on the cryptic side. I can think of some Portuguese filmmakers.
Oh yeah, of course.
Who will leave things on the cryptic, and you never get a full understanding of what are you talking about.
Yeah, no. Some directors should just shut up.
It's usually when they don't know shit. That's all for today. If you'd like to reach out and suggest a film for the next episode, you can find us on the podcast official Instagram and Facebook pages. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode, or simply give us a like. Please. That's how our podcast can grow ever more groovy. Thanks for listening and see you next time.
Give the buys. Bye bye.